pulled up to the house, and Chad's mother, Laura, was 15 or 16, I think I remember, and she had always thought about how, when she met her grandma, what a wonderful experience it was going to be. She would be a beautiful little lady that had everything that sparkled with a grandmother. We pulled up in this car. There was a Buick, and there were 8 of us, plus twins on the way.
And you were pulling in at Grandma's house?
We pulled into Grandma's house in Toledo.
Yeah.
And she stepped out onto the porch. She was part Indian, and she smoked a corncob pipe. She wore a long woolen dress clear down to the ground, and her hair was pulled back into a bun. And she was the most ungraceful looking woman that Laura had ever seen. She was expecting this beautiful queen of grandmother.
Expecting a grandma.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And their grandma Spurgeon stepped out on the porch. And her face just, Laura's face just sank. This is my mother. She was part Indian, so she had a lot of Indian traits.
Randy, that's where you get that
culture.
116.
She wasn't very hospitable right then, was
Oh, right.
she?
She wasn't sure what she's going to do with this big.
I do have a picture, and actually I'm going to put it on the Austin Facebook.
We will enjoy it.
And actually, it's Franklin Austin, a private. He was the first one in that list. Anyway, but I will put it on. She wasn't very hospitable.
Okay, that's Ray or
Where's Ray?
who's the next in line there?
I think Ray's after you.
Yeah, Ray.
Speak up,
It's
Ray.
Grandma Spurgeon? That's the lineage of the Charles Spurgeon. Huh?
Dolly, come here, you can fill in. Do you people can hear her?
Yeah, we can hear her.
I'm loud. I have to be. His health is better. He's walking better than he did 2 months ago, much better. And feeling better, sleeps really good.
He ate pretty good.
Answers to a lot of
Does
prayers.
not do any dishes. We get along fine. Everything's going good.
You know, Ray, when I was a boy, living out on the ranch down off the Coquille River, I used to just be amazed when I'd see Ray come down from breakfast.
With a Tupperware bowl.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't Tupperware, but it was big.
Pyrex.
I think a full box of Cheerios or whatever it was at that time went into it.
When we were married, my mom would put dishes out on the table, you know. Ray got the cupboard, got the biggest mixing bowl she had, and filled it up with cereal.
Everybody else had little like this. Ray had a big salad bowl of cereal.
Right.
That's right. Well, Ray graduated from Marshfield High, but he skipped 100 and some odd days, and if it hadn't been for the principal, you never would have graduated. Anyway, Ray had his fishing pole or his rifle, and he was headed to Coquille, and he was hitchhiking, and he got out by Bunker Hill, and his car stopped, and principal came by. He asked Ray, said, "Is there any school today? Isn't school going on?" And Ray said, "I don't know." He said, "Well, come on, get on in the car." And he did. Ray got in, and the guy did a took him right up to Marshfield High. Yeah, believe me.
His fishing pole and his
The principal started working on him and got him through. Yeah.
Well, I remember going to demolition derbies a while ago.
When I got into the family, when people were
Speak up.
first met the family, and Berta said, "He didn't tell us she had red hair."
When I was young, I had a paper route out in Green Acres, and I used my $6.26 to buy myself a 22 rifle.
They're not peanuts.
I wanted to have a rifle to go hunting, and so I used that rifle all the time. Well, one weekend I went away to somewhere. Ray found out where I was keeping that rifle and the shells. And he went out into the slough, marsh, and was shooting ducks, which was kind of thing for a 22 rifle. Well, the game warden came along. Ray didn't know what to do, so he just threw the gun down in the swamp.
Oh no.
And then went on home. Well, that was a week later. I wondered where's my 22 rifle. And he says, well, and he admitted that he had taken it out, and so the tide had come in, and 2 or 3 times the rifle had been underwater.
Underwater?
And so we went out to find the rifle, and there was my rifle laying in the swampy water, and I had to get it all, but he thought whatever was mine was his. Vernon?
Okay, all right. When I came, I never knew half of my brothers and sisters. I'll tell you that because I wasn't born until after in '37, and I never got to do George, and I never got to do Margaret very much. And Wendell, I just kind of remember him a little bit because he was going to college, I think, around.
Marshfield High School, and I used to.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And Daryl, which is younger than me, when we went to school, Barbara and I, we would walk to school, but Daryl would walk on, not this Daryl, Daryl would walk on the other side of the street because he didn't want them to know that we were his sisters. He was a much important person, so he wouldn't walk with us at all. We'd have to just, but we always walked to school a whole mile. That was our big story. We had to walk to school a whole mile.
Yeah.
I'm feeling down. I'm feeling down.
Whoa.
Listen up, kids. So yeah, most of these kids are on buses, but we have this story that we always had to walk.
So that's a true story, walking a mile to school.
Yeah, miles
snow.
to school, back and forth. But it was so funny because he would never walk with us. I don't know why. Never walk with us. But,
That's funny because Barbara says it was me.
yeah,
That's
that's
I'm glad to hear the other side of the story.
Who would go with Daryl?
But we had a good family, and I always think of that house on Highland every time I go by it. What fun we had in that house. That's the most precious house that we've ever had. And Dad was there in his little chair, and Daryl used to come by and roll cigarettes for him. And him and Dad had such a good, I think that's why I got married to Daryl, because he rolled cigarettes for Dad all the time.
That's a really good reason.
And he had
It was very important to Dad.
and he sat right in front of the door and had a cane.
Yes,
And
oh
if someone
yeah.
misbehaved, he'd reach his cane out and grab him by the leg.
And he used to scare Chad to death. Because Chad would go to that house. He said it was the creepiest place he'd look around at night and he'd say, well, there's no place to put Chad. We'll just hang him up right the Chad on his nail.
I was scared of Dad Austin too.
Yeah, everybody was scared of him with his little cane.
And when we lived there, Grandma Austin had a really tough time making things meet. We all tried to put money together. So we finally, all of the living sons and daughters put money together, and we bought them a little house, bought her a little house up on 14th Street. Well, the day we decided to move from that house, we all had it all boxed up and everything, and we had everything ready to move, and we moved everything up to the house on 14th Street, except one thing. Louise had taken Bob and put him in a bed upstairs. And we forgot where he was. Bob, Louise says, oh my golly, he's still down on rushed down, and there he was, sound asleep.
Oh, jeez. Of course.
All by himself.
That's the first time I've heard that story.
Can you tell that again?
The statute of limitations.
Also in that house, we used to have so much fun because they had a full basement. And us girls, we had you little kids would enjoy this. We had a ballerina's paradise, and we had everything down there. It was really fun. But one thing about that downstairs basement, there used to be a kind of a drunk who would come by and get inside the door. Well, Mom had a hatchet. She had a hatchet by her bed at all times. And she went down there and she got that guy out.
Never came back.
Never came back. But we always loved that house. And I remember Mom taking the old chicken and wringing its neck and putting it on a post. And that chicken would run around. We remember that.
Went off his head.
Yeah, off went his head. But Mom was a strong woman, I'm telling you. She was a strong woman.
And she made the best fried chicken
Oh
ever.
my goodness, yes.
And gravy.
And gravy.
And gravy, Bunny, and gravy.
But when I got in the family, all the girls, I made the gravy.
Oh, right,
Yes,
you
yes.
inherited.
Yeah, you inherited.
You can tell she's a good cook.
Oh, Daryl wants to tell you that Dad had never had seen TV, and down in Broadway, right downtown by the Egyptian Theater, there was a Bay Appliance, and so we took Dad for a ride downtown, and we went by the Bay Appliance, and there was a TV, and Dad got to see the first TV he'd ever seen. He didn't know what it was. That was kind of a special time for him. But we have had a good life, I'm telling you.
Amen.
And I don't know what Mom, I suppose Dolly was probably in the same position. And I had 1 kid, 2 kids, 3 kids. To this, for me, I wonder what she thought.
She
Other
loved
than
them all.
she had to
She
feel,
loved
yeah,
them all.
she did. She loved them all. And they
She
loved
hugged
her.
awfully tight.
But I
Our
remember
kids said sometimes.
chase that rain. I mean, it was Greg she would chase, not Ray, because they were kind of alike.
Mother Austin would come to our house and my mom, and they would have a day helping iron and stuff. That's
Oh,
when
she
Nana
loved
would
to iron.
help me.
Does anybody know what ironing is?
No.
Yeah, you take it out of the dryer, go.
I think all the men iron now.
But
You
they
know
would
what?
talk, the two mothers would talk and tell me how to
Press.
not have such a big family.
It didn't work.
I just didn't have to go in the bathroom and laugh. It was too late anyway.
When we lived out at Green Acres before we moved into town, I used to have a bicycle route for the Portland, Oregonian, and I'd get up early and I'd get ready to take off, and Mom would say, Wendell, would you catch a couple chicken? And so I'd get some bread crumbs and throw it out on and I'd catch a couple of chickens and they'd come up around me by the leg. And then I'd take off for my paper route. Well, the last thing I often caught to say was Grandma Austin with 2 chickens with their heads like this, and I was taking off and she was wringing their necks. And when their necks came off, then she let them scoot around.
She knew
for
they
a
were
while.
dead.
She knew they were dead, but they were still jumping. And when I got home from the paper route, the chickens would be all dressed and everything and on the frying pan for a second.
That's
We
what you
think
call
we didn't have
fresh
any
meat.
pets.
Yeah, that's fresh meat.
Whose chickens were they?
I think they were ours because Grandma always. We used to live sometimes in 3 different houses in 1 year. And Grandma Austin was such a good provider. She would take in washings and ironings and things like that, and she'd bake bread and sell it for 10 cents a loaf or something like that. And so she would always make sure that there was food around, but she always had food and things for everybody that needed it. And oh, when we lived in Oklahoma, everybody was good to each other. And one time I was I was 7 years old when we moved from Oklahoma to Coos Bay or Marshfield, and so I had to be 5 or 6 years old. And I really had a good arm, like Bob and all of his brothers in baseball. And I could knock a beer bottle off the fence just with a clod of dry dirt, which is typical in Oklahoma. And the neighbor called and said, Marthy, her mother's name was Martha Elizabeth, says, what are you having for dinner? She says, well, we got some green beans and probably some okra and things like that, typical Oklahoma food. She says, well, one of my chickens was over on your place and it needs to come home. Is there any way I could get it scared home? She said, well, I'll send Wendell out. So I went out, and there was that hen, and I sneaked around the house, and that hen looked around and looked back at me, and said, I better get out of here. So we started back across our garden, got to the fence, and turned around, and I picked up a clod of dirt, and just as it was flying up over the fence about this high, I threw that clod of dirt and hit it right in the head. Just cold cocked it, and it dropped down in the fence and hung there. Well, the neighbor said, Marthy, would you like to have chicken for dinner? She says, one of my hens has hung herself. And if you'd like, because we've already got dinner planned, if you'd like, if you and Wendell would like to go out and get that chicken out of the fence, you can have it for dinner. So I went out and took it out of the fence, dead as a doornail, and we had chicken for dinner. But I didn't like that chicken very much. It didn't taste too well with me.
I think one of the things about the huge family was how really great they all grew up, and nobody got in trouble, and nobody was arrested that I have ever heard. Well, Ray come close to it. You know, and everybody turned out so good. Some college graduates, themselves through college, and hard workers, and a good tradition and heritage.
You know, Mom and Dad would be proud. Very proud.
Grandma Austin was certainly not a bigot. She had some of her best friends were Negroes in Oklahoma, and so she always searched out people from either church or neighborhood that she, and lots of times she'd take us out to this Negro lady's home, and we'd have coffee and cookies or something like that. She was just really open-minded, and everything was.
I remember when she took Aunt Bessie, and that was the Spurgeon out
I have to go get my pants in a minute.
Green Acres.
Maybe I can go
Or,
with
oh, no, I guess they were in Toledo then.
right,
Anyway,
parking lot.
took Aunt Bessie, and she was big like this. She's big.
we have
Took
to
her
walk
to
with
those
her.
Goodwill, yeah, to
Right,
get some
that's
things
right.
because
And I have
they had a
to
big
get
family too.
They have shorts.
She had a big dress and big everything. She came out,
You want to sit
stuff,
on
a lot of stuff inside her clothes.
This is Bessie.
Bessie,
Yeah,
Bessie.
I don't want to get
Came
I
to
just
town,
want to get one
went
by
back home
hand.
with a whole bunch of goodies.
She got the clerk's attention down to the one side end of the store. She had big bloomers on. She wore big bloomers purposely.
For purpose.
And she said, now, Alma, what size is your baby going to be? And so she stuffed baby clothes down in her bloomer all the way around. We got home, we had a whole wardrobe.
I have to get my mom's
I always think of her when I
to
think
get
about
in my mom's
Yeah.
Ray married married me for my money. I don't know if all of you know that or not, but I was 15, he was 19. And we'd been married for probably 2 weeks, and there was a knock on our little apartment door. And the biggest policeman I about ever saw in my life came, and he was looking for Ray Austin. And I said, well, he's not here right now, he's working. And he said, well, he had a thing. And he said, he owes so many dollars worth in fines, and if I don't get the money, he's going to have to go to jail. Now these were all tickets that he had for parking tickets and meter tickets, different little things. Those days tickets weren't very much. Came to $50. I had $50. I read and got it, paid him, and you know, I don't even remember if I got a receipt. I probably did. I saved him. He owed me $50. I was so scared all my life.
Has he paid you yet?
No, I don't think so. Always say he married me for my money.
When they lived down on the Coquille Valley, Chad had a dairy farm, and he had about 50 milking cows. And I went down and I stayed with them for one summer, I think it was, and we'd get up at about 5:30 in the morning, and would go down and milk those cows. And Chad would take all the cows that would go on a milking machine, and then he gave all the rest of them to me, the kickers that we had to put on the kickers. And so I had to milk 17 cows with hobbles on them, while he milked the other 50 with the machines. One morning I decided I was kind of hungry before we went down to the valley, and I went and got some crackers, and Laura always had crackers and honey, and I put some crackers and honey together, and I got some honey on my fingers, and then I licked all of them. Well, then we had to roll the cans of milk out on a thing, walk and do that. We had two, one to walk on, one to roll the can of milk. I got halfway out there, and I slicked honey on my fingers. I lost that full can, 55 gallons of whole milk.
Were you fired?
He didn't dare fire me. The first time I ever saw Chad hold his anger. Boy, he was silent, but I probably lost him $50 or $60, $70 worth of cream right off the landing. Yeah.
Now they had a big chicken farm too, didn't they?
We had 52 cows and 1,000 chickens.
Ooh, I remember that.
And Mom used to candle every egg, every day, by hand.
And somebody came by and picked them up.
Yeah.
She would never, whenever she cooked or anything, used eggs at all, she'd always crack one, put it in a glass that she could see into, because if it had any spots on it, she'd throw it away. Because she knew all about candling eggs.
She did, yeah.
One time, one winter, when we lived in the ranch, it'd been raining a lot, the river would flood, and Dad'd have to row me across the water to catch the school bus to go to Riverton school. Well, it wasn't raining, but it got really cold. And one thing I learned is if you take the shortcut up over the manure pile, it's frozen, the top isn't frozen.
Dad said, I told you not to do it, didn't he?
I didn't go to school that day.
I bet.
But there's lots of memories. My sister put some pictures on Facebook. I don't know if everybody gets the same ones I do or not. She's going through Mom's old picture album. Got my first grade class picture with her school teacher. And her comment was that it looks like she was in Appalachia. And it does pretty much look that way, but I remember very well the girl, a little blonde girl sitting right next to me, we sat on the front porch of the school and watched her father's barn burn down across the river as first or second grade. Nothing we could do, no fire departments around. Class project for the day, I guess.
Jack, what have you and Roma been doing for the last 15 or 20 years?
Stupid things. When Roma retired from teaching, I decided I was going to retire too, so she talked me into moving to southern Utah. And we built a bed and breakfast, became the #1 lodging facility in the county.
And that happened by TripAdvisor. You guys know what TripAdvisor is? Yeah, you go on TripAdvisor, we were rated #1. Yay! Anybody from Europe loved our bed and breakfast. And
we're out in the middle of the desert. I mean,
we're out
literally,
in
the
the middle of
nearest
nowhere.
grocery store is 44 miles away.
Oh my
Wow.
goodness!
So
Restaurant is probably at 20 miles from us.
there is some civilization during tourist season between there, but not much. And so that's where we've been. We started bed and breakfast. Had a small herd of buffalo. Just kept busy trying to keep things going.
What's your bed
The
and
last,
breakfast?
pardon?
What's your bed and breakfast called?
Nodum Ranch Bed and Breakfast.
Where's your cards? Yeah, where's your cards?
This was our sign we had out at the road, made out of building materials, and we put that up there. I was guaranteed by Roma's brother that the wind would never blow it down.